here. Today I am back with the first code stream that I'm going to be doing on Retrosumo, which is the gaming social network that I'm doing for a bit of fun in my spare time, to learn new things, and also just to experiment a bit with streaming. If you haven't been on any of the previous streams or seen any of those videos, you might be wondering what the hell is going on behind me. I'm up in my parents' house and there's some Halloween decor in the background, so that's why it looks a bit strange. Yeah, so essentially, like, what I'm looking at doing today is just a couple of really basic things. So Retrosumo is supposed to be a social network for retro gaming, but we're going to build some basic mechanics around posting content onto Retrosumo and then displaying posts that have been posted, I suppose. So I suppose the key thing really is getting these kind of basics up and running. Obviously, there's not going to be anything really like specific to retro gaming just yet, but we'll get there. You have to start somewhere. So rather than talk too much about it, I'm just going to jump straight in and get cracking on the code. So one of the things that's a little bit new is that in my video feed, I now have, you'll see down at the bottom, I think I mentioned it on the last stream that I was hoping to basically add a little bit of information about the stream at the bottom. So you'll see in there now that I have just a very kind of basic list, kind of a to-do list of the things that I'm hoping to achieve in this particular stream. So the idea of this is being basically that if you come across the stream kind of halfway through while I'm working on it, that you'll see kind of like the progress that's been made in the stream so far and what we're currently working on. So I'll be updating that as I work through the next hour or so. So that's about that, and let's dive straight in, right? So the first thing that we want to do is essentially to set up some feature tests just for this code that we're going to be writing. So in the previous stream, I got this basic scaffolded app put together where we have the authentication, so the basic Laravel authentication, and that's scaffolded out. And this here is actually a React app. So the whole thing is a React app that's being displayed here. So obviously nothing much going on right now. There's a nav that does nothing other than allow you to log out. And we have this area here where we're going to have the main application user interface. So I can log out here and I can use all of the basic Laravel authentication functionality. All of this auth is just the basic stuff, so it's all like bootstrap styled and all that kind of thing. But in the actual Retrosumo UI, we have Tailwind running, so we're going to be using Tailwind to style up our components. Not going to be focusing too much on styling today. So yeah, I mean, it's basically, today's all about getting core mechanics working and real basic stuff. So we'll just be focusing on those, but we'll definitely be coming back and obviously trying to make Retrosumo look a little bit nicer down the line. So let's jump straight in, and just going to open up Visual Studio Code. And the first thing we're going to do is we're actually just going to write some tests, right? So by default, I think I have no shortcuts up. Fantastic. So if I run PHP unit, this is going to fail because there's just the basic standard tests. So if I have a look for test, let's just actually go down and look to find it the old-fashioned way. So we've got this example test class, and I'm actually just going to delete that, and I'm going to delete this unit test class as well. So for the purpose of this, we're going to be just creating feature tests. I'm not going to be creating unit tests here. So let's go ahead and actually create some tests, right? So we're going to be testing that people can see posts, people can post posts, and things like that. So I'm just going to call it post test. How to name things, let's call it posts test for want of a better thing. Right, so we've got our new test in here, complete with an example, and when we run PHP unit that fails because there's a redirect in place. Of course there is. Okay, so what's happening in our basic test example here is it's basically going to the root or the index route here, and it's checking that it returns a 200 status. But what actually happens is if you go to that route and you're not logged in, then what's going to happen is it's going to redirect you to the login page right now. Now, I actually don't want that to happen, so I think this is actually a perfect use. This is actually a perfectly fine test. So I'm going to say basically that we should test anyone can view the home page. All right, so you should be able to get a 200 response here. You shouldn't be redirected to the login screen. And the reason for that is that our feed is actually going to be public. Now, we need to make decisions about whether that should be the case or not later. But for now, yeah, the feed is going to be public. So I think we should make it so that anybody can view the homepage and see that homepage. So let's go ahead and make some changes to that. So right now, what happens when we log in, right? So we get served up that main route, and it's going to, actually, now that I think about it, really what I want to test is not really that they can go to the login or that they can go to the main page. I'm actually really more focused on API tests in here. So maybe rather than do this, I should just focus on API tests for now. So if I say tests that, let me see, what am I saying? I'm saying that I want to test that anybody can essentially view a list of posts or a feed of posts. We'll just say a list of posts for now. So what I want to do then is basically test an API. So what I'm thinking with this is we're going to have to basically create some posts, call an API, and then basically check that the API response firstly returns a success status, and then secondly contains the correct data that we're expecting from a list of posts. So there's a few things that we're going to have to create in order for this to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to basically say, okay, well, I'm not going to be testing like a typical like blade template route here. I'm going to be testing an API. So I'm going to say this at JSON, and when we're using JSON, we need to specify what method. And I'm going to say I want to check what happens when I go to the API posts route. So in order for this to really work, I'm going to need to be able to show a list of posts, right? So in here, I'm going to create some posts. Now, we don't actually have this model made yet, but let's just do this for now so we can scaffold it out. And then finally, I want to check that the JSON data that comes back from this API has some content in it. So with Laravel, because I'll be returning a paginated resource, the JSON object that it's going to return should have a data property. And the data property should essentially be an array of items. So in this case, I'm creating 5 items. So I should expect to see a data property or a data array with 5 items in it in the JSON response. So if I say assert JSON fragment, no, what am I doing? Assert JSON count. And I'm expecting it to have 5 items in the data property. So that's a basic test, and obviously that's going to fail right now because we don't have any of that stuff implemented. And sure enough, class at post not found. But that's kind of basically what I think should happen with that API. If I think about what else I want to test, the other thing will be creating new posts and things like that. So what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll create another test when we get that in place. But for now, let's go ahead and create a model for the post. So if we come back to the command line, let's make a model with a migration. Maybe we should create the resource as well. I can never remember the syntax for this. So, and that will create a factory. So PHP artisan make model post. Let's create a resource controller, why not? So this -a argument is going to scaffold out automatically a migration for creating the database table. It's going to create a model, and it's also going to create a factory for easily populating data for our tests against that model, and it's also going to scaffold out a controller for us as well. Now the controller will be a resource controller by default, which is oh, hey, Big Seal, you're from Croatia. In the future, want to get a job in Ireland? That's cool. Every time you start a new project, you have a problem with project structure. Yeah, I guess for me, I've kind of come up with something that works quite well for me, but I tend to flip flop a bit and try out new, different approaches to this every so often. Because I primarily work with Laravel, I typically tend to structure my projects where I'll have my Laravel project, and then I'll actually have my React front end as part of that Laravel project, and use Laravel Mix to do builds and all that kind of stuff on the front end. Occasionally, I will build out a separate front end or a separate React app using like Create React App or something like that to have that. But I find, every so often I'll toy around with the idea of having like a full on single page application completely decoupled from my Laravel backend. And then I start getting into the whole hot mess of, okay, now I need to worry about like how am I going to do authentication? Am I going to have to put in like JWTs and all of that because I'm using Laravel anyway, like all of the session and authentication stuff is just like batteries included when it comes to Laravel, so it just makes it really, really easy. So typically for me, when I start off a project now, I will start it as a Laravel project and I'll scaffold out the React part of it. I actually did a stream last week. I was just testing out streaming, so I didn't really announce that I was going to do it or anything, but it's actually up on YouTube where I scaffolded out this basic structure with the Laravel backend and a React front end app. So check that out if you want to have a look at how I set this particular example up. But essentially, if you look at the actual structure of the app, you have the basic Laravel structure here. And then that gives you a resources directory, and in here we have our JavaScript folder, and this is basically where all of the React app lives. So we have the index.js entry, which has basically binding a React component to an element in the DOM, and then this app component kind of takes over from there, right? And obviously we'll be fleshing this out and adding things like React Router and other things as we go on. I'm also using Tailwind in this project, so my CSS file here is just basically the standard Tailwind include file. I'm not using Sass or anything else, so I don't really need that, but I'm leaving it there for now just because my the front end of the authentication is still using that kind of default Bootstrap stuff that comes included with Laravel. So that's kind of like the basics of the structure. Good luck with that search for a job in Ireland. I think there's quite a bit going around, especially in Dublin, quite a bit in Cork as well. Pretty decent place to live. Housing is a big issue at the moment. It's very hard to find a place to live. So if you're looking to rent somewhere in the city centre, it can be firstly really difficult and secondly really expensive. But I think that's pretty much a global issue at the moment. So it's not really all that unique to Ireland. But best of luck with the job search, and feel free to chat to me if you need any advice about working in Ireland. So I'm just going to jump back to what I was doing there, which is getting the tests set up. So I just created that model, the post model, with a database migration and factories and so on. So that's going to give us a post.php model, which is our basic model. It's going to give us a create posts table migration. So in here I can basically put anything that I want around the post. So I'm just going to very quickly map out what should be in here. So we should have an unsigned big integer user ID. We should have long text as well for now, with the text of the post, and we'll just leave it at that for now. We will need a foreign key as well. So I should say that when you use the Laravel authentication scaffolding, it gives you some like base migrations out of the box for creating like a users table. It also gives you a user model and all of that kind of thing. So you can see this is already available to me, and I've already got this run so that I can log in and out of the application and things like that. So I'm now creating a foreign key relationship to that table. So I'm going to say create a foreign key on the user ID column. It should reference ID on the users table, and on delete. So this is one of those things that I'll definitely have to come back to and make some decisions on later on. But I mean, the simple thing that I often do is like create an on-delete cascade when it comes to foreign keys. I need to install a formatter for PHP, IntelliFence. So this machine that I'm working on is like a fresh build. I'm dedicating this machine just to doing these live streams. So I am going to, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to run into a few things where I'm going to have to like, you know, set up the environment and set up VS Code with the extensions I need and things like that. But so forgive me for having to stray in and out of that every so often as I work through these streams, but hopefully they'll get less and less frequent as time moves on. So yes, so basically I could just say on delete cascade. So if I delete a user, it's also going to delete any associated post records with that user. In reality, you often don't necessarily want to do that. You might just want to, you know, null out the user ID column, or you might implement soft deleting or something else. But for now, I'm not going to get overly bogged down in it, and I'm just going to leave it where essentially when a user gets deleted, all their posts get deleted as well. We'll come back to that another time in terms of what the best approach, kind of longer term, is for that. So that's my post table. So that should run okay. So if I say PHP artisan migrate, I usually like to just test the rollback as well. Not that I'll ever roll back in production or anything, but I think it's just, I like the idea that I can roll back if I ever need to. Okay, so we now have our post model, so we should get a different error when we go to run PHP unit. Whoa, nice. Okay, so we're seeing all sorts of problems here around user ID doesn't have a default value, insert into post. Okay, so what's happening here is it's trying to run the post factory that was scaffolded out, but obviously there's not going to be anything in that. So if I have a look at that post factory file, you'll see there's literally nothing going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically set a couple of defaults here. So I'm going to say user ID is going to be, let's see, we probably need to create a user actually. So if we say factory app user create, and we'll set text as well. So we'll set this to, we can use the faker library to bring back some kind of data. So it's a post, so I'm just going to say paragraphs 2, and I want it to be as text as opposed to as an array. So that should be a pretty simple scaffolding. So let's see what happens now. Okay, so our factory looks to be working now. There's one thing that I'm going to run into if I don't solve quickly enough though, and that is that if I look at the default PHP unit.xml file, the database it's going to use is going to be the same as my development database that I'm working on. And of course, what that means is that if I bring in, so when I look at my post test here, if I use this refresh database, is it a trait? What is it? Yeah, if I use that trait in my test, which I'm going to need to in a minute, it's actually going to wipe my database every time I run my tests. And obviously, if I'm using the same database as what I'm using for my dev, it means it's going to be pretty frustrating to use. Plus, it's also going to use MySQL, which is going to be a little bit slower. So instead, I'm going to just make a couple of changes here. So the first thing is to, let's see, so database, actually, if I go to my .env file, I'll see what I need. So I need DB connection and DB database, I think. So if I say DB connection is SQLite, and then I think this is the syntax. DB database with colon memory as the value. And then I think what I can do is bring in use refresh database. And now when I run, probably have the same problem because it's not getting that far, but it should stop it from like dumping me out of the environment. So okay, so the next thing I need to do is fix this issue, right? So it's expecting a status code of 200, but it's receiving a status code of 404. Now that's because I don't have any route set up that will view a list of posts, right? So there's no, it's not going to find anything because it's looking at API posts, but this, if I go to my API routes, there's no posts route in here, or route in here. So that's going to be the next thing that I'm going to do is add that in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this, right? So I don't want this default route that's here. Instead, I'm just going to convert this into a function. We can get rid of the argument here. Into a group. And then in here, I'm going to create a number of routes as well. So I'm going to say route, and let's say get posts. And in here, we're going to say posts controller at index. Okay. So now when we run this, it's going to have a new problem. So instead of having a 404 error, because now the route does exist, we have a 500 error. And that's probably because we are using the API authentication middleware, but I don't think we have Laravel Passport set up yet. So if I take this out, let's see what happens. Yeah, we get a different error, and it's probably that. Rooted group must be of type array object given. Okay, so if we did this instead, right? So if we said took that out. Okay, so it's still getting the 500 error, but I'm pretty sure it's down to passport here. Because if I go and let's say into the post controller method that was scaffolded, that's post controller. I apologize. Okay, so learned straight away what the actual issue was there. It should be post controller. So okay, so we're receiving a 401 error. Okay, so now if I take this out and do this, then we'll see invalid JSON. Okay, so it's returning something, but it's returning invalid JSON. Now with this one, as I said before, I want them to be able to call this without having to log in. So I'm going to leave this as is. So what we're going to do is just actually take this out of this group and leave this middleware here to do the API authenticated routes. Okay, so now when we run the tests, so the problem is that this is basically not returning the right JSON. So if we come in here, then the next thing we're going to want to do is basically get a list of posts. So we'll do something pretty naive for now, which is to basically just get all posts. And we're going to return posts. Now this should fail as well, and I'll explain why in a second. So you can see here it's not, I'm not sure about the error here, but essentially, oh yeah, so it's saying that the assert count must be accountable or an iterable. Now you'll notice that I've basically just said post all. So what that's going to do is it's going to return all of the posts in the database. It's not going to return a paginated resource. So if I change this to something like, let's say paginate, and let's create a const width, we'll say items per page up here, and we'll set that to 10. And then we'll say self items per page. Now, boom. Okay, so our test is passing. So our API is now functional, it's now working, and it's passing that very simple test that we wrote, which is nice. So that's pretty cool. And I can now update, let's see. So if I say, hopefully that should update the stream. So, sorry now, 1 second. Oh, I forgot to do one thing. Sorry. So I was hacking away on this project to get that little view at the bottom of the stream where you can see the to-do list. But one thing I neglected to do was include the auto refresh. So I'm just gonna excuse the inception that's going on right now. If I refresh the cache on that, that's updating, and that should be updating every 5 seconds now. So, okay, so what are we doing? We're going to need to bring in Laravel Passport. And the reason we're going to need to bring in Laravel Passport is so that we can authenticate our API requests. So you'll notice that we have a test here where we're basically saying test that anybody can view a list of posts, and that's functional, that's working now. The next test that we're going to write though is going to basically test that a logged in user can post a new post. Okay, so let's say check that logged in user. Actually, do you know what? I'm just going to use. You can do that and then say public function logged in user can post a post, and then let's just for now say this assert true. Okay, so that's working. So I tend to like to not have the names of these tests be ridiculously long. I also think they're pretty self-describing, so I don't think you really need to have the description of the test, rewritten in that doc block comment above it. So I'm just going to leave that out. So logged in user can post a post. So obviously we need to do something else here. So essentially, we're going to let me see. So we're going to want to firstly, we're going to need to check that the user is logged in. So in order to be able to do that, we'll need to be able to log in as a user, essentially, right? So in this case, we're checking that a logged in user can post a post. So the first thing we need to do is get a user record, log that user in the test, and then call an API as that user and check that the API works, essentially, right? So if we think of that through, so essentially the first thing we need to do is create a user record. So we're going to use the user factory. The built-in one should work just fine. So we're going to create that. We're now going to log in as that user. So we need to bring in Passport. So right now, if I try to bring in Passport, there's nothing there. That's because Passport isn't installed. Now, let me think. I'm going to need to go to the Laravel docs for this because I can never remember. The names of these composer packages and what have you. So we're just going to get that up and running quickly here. So if we go to installation, it's pretty simple in fairness. I probably could have guessed that one. Composer require Laravel Passport. So what that's going to do is it's going to basically bring in the Laravel Passport package. Laravel Passport is an OAuth 2 server for Laravel. So it makes it really easy to basically authenticate API requests using an OAuth 2 API server. It's really, really simple, and it gives you all sorts of ways of authenticating with your application out of the box. It's really, really nice. If you go to the table of contents for this particular page on the Laravel documentation, you'll see you've got like issuing access tokens, you've got password grant tokens, implicit grant tokens, personal access tokens, client credential grants tokens. You can define scopes, and there's all sorts of things that you can do to make it easy to work with a Laravel Passport API, authenticated API, within a Laravel application itself, one that's using JavaScript. So we're going to be obviously going through all of that as well in the course of this. So it still hasn't installed. One thing about this machine I'm working off is that it's pretty slow. It's an old 2011 27-inch iMac that I've had for years. It's taken a lot of abuse over those years. It's still pretty good for the age, but yeah, things can be a bit slow. Obviously, this is just slow because of the network. It's having to pull down all of these packages. Okay, so that's the package installed. So the next thing we need to do is run some migrations. So let's do that. And the next thing is to run Passport install. So this is going to create a couple of clients, I think. Yep. Okay, so we've now basically done the basics of getting Passport up and running. We do also, however, need to add a trait to our user class, our user model, should I say. So has API tokens, and if we import that. Oh, do I not have that set up? Oh no, that's annoying. Okay, so we're going back into our extensions and PHP import. I could have sworn that came with namespaces resolver. Okay, hang on. So do we really need that? What does debug support give us? Install xdebug, nah. Okay. We have IntelliFence installed. Go to type definition. Let me see what I have on my other machine. Just 1 second. So if we look at PHP, we have IntelliFence and debug. Sorry, yeah, IntelliFence debug extension pack. I'm guessing it's extension pack. No, so that's just IntelliSense and the debugger. That's namespace resolver. Okay. Okay, space resolver. So let's get that in there and install. And we may need to reopen that package or that file in order to be able to import. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so we can close the sidebar, and that's bringing in that's basically saying that the user model can have this API tokens trait. We now need to go into our auth service provider, and we need to say passport. We'll import that, and we will say, what are we doing? Passport roots, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, whoops. This keyboard is junk. I'm really going to need to replace it. And then last step. So there's quite a bit to actually getting Passport up and running, but you only have to do this once. Once it's done, you can kind of basically forget about it. And it's to change this to the Passport driver. So that's the API guard for authentication. We don't need to customize our migrations or anything. We don't need any of that, and that's fine. Okay, so that's basically that. So now when we come back to our test, we're going to say passport acting as user. Okay, so what that's going to do is basically for the rest of this method, the test is going to act as this newly created user, which means it should be logged in. So what do we actually want to test? So we want to basically test that a logged in user can post a post. I'm going to say create a new post. Sounds a bit more readable to me. So I basically want to say, okay, well, we're going to make an API request to a post endpoint, and the post endpoint will be the same as the previous one, but in this case we're going to pass in some data to it. So basically some text, and I suppose we can just put in whatever we want here. So this is a sample post. And then we need to do an assertion. So we're going to say, response assert status first. So it's a creation. So we're creating a new post, so it should be a 201 response. And that's probably all we really need to worry about here. We could test that it actually gets inserted into the database and do all sorts of other things as well. But for now, I'm just going to keep it pretty simple and assert that the status returned is a 201. So now when we vendor, I need to create some aliases here. This is ridiculous. When we run the test, we'll see it received a 405. What's a 405? Method not allowed. Oh yeah, okay. So that's because we don't have the root set up. So we go to API.php, and in here then we're going to say, okay, so root posts to posts, post controller at store. Okay, and then in the store method, you can see it's not doing anything right now, so it should still fail. It received a 200 because it's just going to return an empty thing. So we could make this pass really easily. So we probably shouldn't do that. We should probably check that the post actually gets created as well. So assert status. I'm just going to go. Let's see if we go into testing. Assertions, assert. Where are the database assertions? I'm in the wrong one, aren't I? Testing database. So, whoop. So assert. Okay, so assert database has. I can't type on this keyboard. We're going to say posts, and we're going to say text. This is a sample post. Let's see. It's pretty ugly, but let's see how it goes. So when we run this, failed asserting that false is true. Okay, so we can fix the first one pretty easily by returning response and just an empty response with a 201 status. Okay, the table is empty. So what we're going to do then is we're going to create that post. So the easiest thing to do would be to say, well, post is equal to, let's do some validation. So we'll say data is equal to this, validate request, and we'll say it has to have text, and that's pretty much it. I don't think we need to worry too much about it other than that. And then what we can do is we can basically say, okay, so we'll want to associate this post with the logged in user. So let's say user is equal to request user. Now we're going to run into a new problem because we're going to try and basically create this new post as from a relationship on the user model, which isn't going to exist yet. So let's have a look and see. Okay. So on the users table, let's create a post with that data. So there's going to be two issues with that. The first is that there's going to be no relationship on the user model. So we're going to need to create that. And the second is that it's going to fail here because of a mass assignment exception, because we don't have the text property set as fillable on the post model yet. But let's just run the tests. So the table is empty. Interesting. Did I save it? I didn't save it. Okay. So expected, okay, 500 error, and that's going to be because if we go into laravel.log, what date is it today? It's the 29th, right? Yeah. So if we clear that down and then rerun the tests, we can see call to undefined method posts, sure enough. So if we go to user.php and we scroll down to the bottom, we can now say create a post method, return this as many post class. Rerun the test, and we're still getting a 500 error. So let's try that again. Add text to fillable properties to allow mass assignment on the app post. So if we go to the post.php model and we say protected, fillable is equal to text, and we try again, boom, our tests are now passing. So a logged in user can create a post. Perfect. Okay, so we might as well round out our tests by checking that a guest user can't create a post. So it's kind of like not the same, but similar enough type of test. So function guest user cannot create a new post. So to do this, we're going to say, basically do the same thing as what we're doing here. So let's just let's create like a private constant width sample post, and we'll say that has text of this is a sample post, and we'll do that. And then what we'll do is, instead of having to do this, we could do post, and let's just leave it at that for now. See, does that still work? Yeah, that's fine. And then assert that the database has self sample post. Okay, and then what we're going to do is basically try this, but what we're expecting is that this should have a 401 status, I believe. Boom, perfect. So what we're saying is that when we try to run this API without logging in, it should return a 401 unauthenticated error message. So it does. So that's Laravel Passport, and our basic tests done. So we should now be able to, let me see if I go in and say Laravel Passport's done. So the next thing we're going to do is, we have the Post API essentially working already as well now, because we've got it returning a list of posts. We'll need to work on order and all sorts of things with that in due course. And we have a storing posts as well, and we may need to do other things with this as well at some point. But for now, the basic mechanics of those are working. So I think we can say that the Post API is now working as well. So the next thing that we want to do is basically get our UI up and running. So at the moment, it's not doing very much of anything. So let's fix that now. So I'm just going to close down everything from here. And if I bring up the structure, we are doing what? So we'll want to get rid of this whole hello v3 thing. So if we go into resources.js, what do we have right now? We have a nav, we have an app. Okay, so for now, let's keep things nice and simple. Let's say div class name is equal to container mx auto. And let's put all of our code, so code to go here, and let's run a watcher. Oh yeah, of course. So we were using retrosumo.test, but when I'm working with React, I like to use browser sync. So we're going to run it on localhost 3000 so that we can benefit from having browser sync up and running. So let's log back in. Okay, so you can see here. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to, it will drive me crazy if I leave it like that. So I'm going to do one small thing, which is I am going to say container in here as well. Which hasn't, oh, no. Okay. Apologies. So we will say the class name container on this. I'm going down a rabbit hole here, doing stuff that's not important, but that's okay. So now I'm going to need to move flex and all of that onto the container. And we'll probably need to Oh, we need to MX auto on this as well. Okay, so that's the nav. We can close that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the post form. So I'm going to basically say post form. We'll just start with that. So where am I going to put this? Let's just create it in here for now. So I'm going to create a post.jsx file here. We're going to import React from React, and we will export const, and let's see, post form is equal to, and let's do this for now. Post form. Okay, and let's see. So if we say import post form from components posts, and see how we go. Okay, so we'll do the same then. So we'll have like a post feed, and we'll say post feed, and that's going to fail. So we'll say export const post feed is equal to, and let's just say feed. Okay, so we'll worry about the feed in just a moment, but the first thing that we want to do is get this form working, right? So let's say I'm going to bring back my brackets here. Prettiers after getting rid of them on me. So we'll convert this into a form. We'll give it a class with, we'll say, margin of, let's try 8. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is add something into the form. So we'll say, what do we want to do here? We want to add a text area anyway. So we'll have a text area with a value of text and an on change set text. So event something like that, right? So we will need to bring in the useState hook from React, and we will need to say const text set text is equal to use state empty string, and yep, okay, seems to be working. So that's our text area. Obviously it looks terrible at the moment, so let's make some changes there. So we're going to firstly say width full, we're going to say border, we'll say rounded, we'll say shadow inner, and we'll also say autofocus actually. Okay, so that's a bit better. What else do we want to do? So what are we doing? We are going to give it a placeholder. So we'll say have a placeholder of what's going on. Okay, and that's made it clear that we need some additional classes to do on this. So we're going to say p of, I don't know, let's say 4. See what that looks like. So it's probably okay on the horizontal, but on vertical it's too much. So I'm going to say px4 and py2. See what that looks like. Yeah, that looks better. Maybe even px3. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. The other thing we're going to do is set rows to, let's say 5 for now. Probably too much. Let's try 4. Maybe even 3 actually. Okay, cool. So that's the text area, and then we will also want a button. we'll say button type submit, post. And as you can see, that's completely unstyled right now. So we'll say class name is, okay. I'm thinking a kind of a pink theme here. So let's say pink 600, text white. Yeah, it probably needs to be, oops, probably needs to be 500. Let's go 600 to be safe. Rounded, let's say P2 for now. We'll probably need to do the same thing where we say PY1 PX3. Not bad. Maybe a little more padding, I'm not sure. So I'm going to make this uppercase. I'm going to set the tracking to be quite wide on that. And I'm going to make the text smaller. I am going to up this to 2. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So the other thing I want to do is I want to bump this over to the right. So I'm just going to say class name text right. May need to like use flexbox and stuff like that to if I want to put other components over here later. But for now we'll just keep it nice and simple. Okay, so that's the basic styling of what I wanted to do with this one. So what else? Let's see. We obviously wanted to actually post, right? So that's the next thing I need to do here. So running a little tight on time, but we'll definitely get through the last couple of items here today. So let's see. We want to do what exactly? So I'm just gonna give me 1 second. I need to just check something here. So we're going to need to basically have that post form actually do something when you submit it, right? So we're going to need to call an API to submit the post to the backend, and then we'll want to like render it in the feed, right? So let's start off by calling a function when we submit the form. So we're going to say on submit is submit. Ah, come on. Submit. I hope that's not after importing something now. Nope, it's not. Okay, and then we're going to say const submit is equal to event, and what we'll do is we will event.prevent default, and then we will call API to submit the post. Okay, so that's what we're going to do there, but for now let's just test it's working by saying submit. Okay, so that's working, and let's just check we can get the text. So echo, boom, perfect. So the next thing we're going to want to do is actually get that to call an API that submits the post. Now, I think Axios is actually already brought in, so let's just double check that. Install, what are we putting them into? Dev dependencies, or dependencies, probably dev dependencies. Save dev, Axios. It's already installed, but let's just get the latest version. So I know Axios comes with Laravel. Okay, so it's done nothing with it. It's using the same version, that's fine. So we're going to need to bring in Axios. So I'm going to import Axios from Axios. And then what we're going to need to do is basically call an API. So we're going to say axios.post. We're going to say /API/posts. We're going to say text. And we will need to do some config and stuff like that, right? But the first thing I want to do is I want to create, I'm actually going to say save post, and we're going to create that as an async function, and that's going to call the API here. So say const response is equal to await that. We will wrap that in a try catch block, and we will console.error the error message for now, and then in here we're going to say save post. Okay. So what we want to do then is console.log or .response. So we'll need to yarn watch this again. Npm run watch. Should just install yarn. I use yarn every day in work, so I'm going to fall over myself every time if I don't install it. But anyway, let's come back to that. So once the watcher is running, let's open SQL Pro and okay, so we'll want to say Retrosumo at local, let's say 127.0.0.1 root Retrosumo test. Say add to favorites, connect. I forgot SQL Pro, is it? Crashes to hell. Okay, let's see. I thought this was fixed. Okay, so that's not good. Okay, that's quite frustrating. So what we're going to do is we're going to say PHP artisan tinker, and we will say post count. Oh, are they the test ones that were created? So yeah, okay. So let's see. We will. Let's MySQL use Retrosumo and truncate table posts, exit, PHP artisan migrate. Oh, we're doing tinker. So I'm going to say post all should be nothing. Yeah, perfect. So what we want to do is just test that when we save these things that actually it does something. So it's not going to work straight off the bat anyway because there's a few issues that we are going to need to address, right? So if I bring up the console here, we're going to see an error straight off the bat when I try and submit this thing. So let's say hello world. And we get a 401 unauthorized error. And of course we do, because we're not actually passing through any cookies or anything like that when we with a request. So how is it going to know to just work? It's not, obviously, right? So if I come into the Passport documentation, I'll see that I can add a middleware to my http kernel.php file. And if I go to the web middleware, then I can say Laravel Passport HTTP middleware create fresh API token class. Okay, so what that's going to do then is it's going to attach a Laravel token cookie to the outgoing responses, and then we basically don't need to do anything from there on out. We can just call the API to our heart's content. So what should happen now is it should say test, should get a different error. Or no error at all. We should just get a response it's basically successful. So you can see a 201 response, status text of created, and post count is 1. So we should see that test post in there. Perfect. Okay. So our form obviously needs to reset and stuff like that, right? So and it should probably do something else as well, but let's just do something really simple and say we're going to set text to an empty string for now. We'll do something with the response later, but we'll say hello post. Boom. Okay. So we'll come back and we'll do something like I don't know, show some kind of a toast in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. And then obviously we'll be repopulating the feed with the new post as well. There's the naive way of doing that, which is probably what we'll do from the start, is to just reload the feed, because it'll show the most recent post at the top. But instead, what I'd like to do then is move to a model where we're using something like Redux, and we'll basically inject the newly created post into the Redux store, so that it gets basically added into the feed without us having to go back to the server and fetch new posts or anything like that. So let's finish things off for today. Going to run about 10 minutes over here, but let's finish things off for today by getting a basic feed of posts coming back. So what we're going to do is start working on this post feed class. So again, with this one, we're going to just make a couple of very basic changes here, where we return this instead of, come on. So we will say, okay, so we're going to need a couple of things here. The first thing we're going to need is, we will say posts, and set posts is equal to use state, and we'll have empty array by default. And then what we'll do is we will have posts.map post equals, and then we'll just say, okay, for starters, let's say post.text, like that. Pretty naive implementation, but should be enough. And obviously this is going to be an empty array, so there's going to be nothing. And sure enough, that's gone away. So what we'll do is we will say if posts.length is equal to 0, then what we'll do is we will return, just let's keep it really simple for now, so no posts to display. Okay, so no posts to display. Hey Otaku dude, yeah, you've just joined for probably the last 5 or 10 minutes of the stream today, but thanks for joining. So yeah, so we're showing no posts. The next thing we need to do is obviously get the post coming back from the API. So let me see, what are we doing? We're going to need to bring in use effect in here. So use effect, and essentially in here we will say use effect. Let's see. So we're going to say const get posts is equal to async, and with this one we're going to say const response is equal to await axios.get API posts, and that should be that. And then we'll set posts to response.data, which is I really don't like that, but I'm pretty sure that's what we need to do. We do need to wrap this in a try catch though, so let's do that. And we'll just error out any errors that come back for now. So we'll rename this to fetch posts, and what we'll do then is basically say, yeah, fetch posts. Hopefully that will just work. Okay, so it's working. We do have an issue with this. So what I think we should do here is, rather than flesh that out, let's go and create a new post feed item component, and in here we will see we'll have post as one of the props, and with this we will return. We actually, do you know what? We can use brackets here and get rid of return altogether and say post.text. And then we can say in here instead, we can say post feed item key is post ID and post is post. And try that. too many requests on the API. What? Okay, that's interesting. So let's just, in the interest of time, let's actually get rid of API throttling for now. Okay, so that's gotten rid of our errors. Obviously, these posts don't look very good. So let's see, what will we get these looking like in the last few minutes? Obviously, we'll come back around to these and make them look a lot better than they do right now. But even if we just got some basic UI up and running. Let's see. So feed item is going to be what? Let's see. So we're going to say we're going to have the user. So this is going to fail actually. So we're going to need to fix that in just a moment. But let's see. If we wrap this, and then let's have that below it. And this will probably crap out. Yep, as expected. And that's because we don't have the post user relationship loading in. Oh, do I have time to write a test? Yeah, I do. Let's just do it. So what I'm looking for here is basically that when we bring back a list of posts, it's going to bring back the post, or it's going to bring back the user relationship. So I'm just going to hide that sidebar for now. Let's create a really quick test here. So public function. So what we're saying is posts list returns user relationship. So what are we doing? We're saying posts is equal to actually just let's create a post. And we'll say first post username is equal to post. Actually, we don't need to do that. Just say post. Post user name. And we probably don't need to do that actually, so we can do that inline. So let's say response is equal to this JSON get API posts. And we want to assert that the JSON contains a fragment with the name of post user name. Okay, this should be that. So let's see, this should obviously fail right now. So vendor, I need to set up these shortcuts, I know. Okay, so trying to get property name of non-object. So if we go to post.php, actually no, sorry, post controller. Post controller? Yeah, okay. And we go to the index, we'll see that we're not bringing in the user. So let's do that now. Try rerunning the test. Okay, so let's try one again. It's call to undefined relationship user on model post. Would be helpful if I did have that defined, wouldn't it? Okay, so public function user return this belongs to user class. And let's see, hopefully we don't have any more errors, but we don't. Okay, perfect. So now our test is passing. I've just done that. So yeah, you can see that the UI is now returning the user's name, which is cool. So let's finish this off. We need to do a couple of things. I want to bring in I want to bring in a timestamp as well. We'll work on the formatting and stuff of the timestamp later, but for now I do want to bring one in. So let's do this. Let's bring a div with a class name of flex and justify between. Let's say, okay, so post dot create that for now. We'll format it later. So yeah, that's fine. And then we've got that. That's cool. Okay, so let's class name margin bottom 8. Give it a bit of breathing room. Let's give it a BG of white. a shadow. We'll make it rounded. And let's give it some padding. So we'll say padding 8 for starters, right? Shouldn't be too much, but you know what? It's actually not that bad. And then with this one, we'll say margin bottom 4. That's pretty good. I'm going to say px of 8 and py of 6 on this one. Just give it a little bit less. That looks good to me. The last thing I want to do is just a couple of really small things. So I'm going to make the timestamp small and gray. So we'll say text gray 600. And as I said, we'll come back to that. I do want to center this with the text on the left. So we'll shift that down a small bit. We want to make the username semi-bold. We'll make it a link at a point in the future. But for now, we can just make it semi-bold. Yeah. Okay, so that's looking pretty good to me. I might make this just be a little bit less, so let's say text gray 900, 700, and then make this text black, so it kind of stands out a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty good. So I'm going to leave it at there for today. Let me go back to my checklist and see did I actually get done what I wanted to get done. I got the post form UI done. I got the simple feed of posts done. And we have the user coming back. We didn't get the date formatting bit that I wanted to get done today done, but that's really only going to take a few minutes at the start of the next stream. So generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with the progress I've made today. I'm not going to be streaming on Thursday this week, so my plan going forward is to live stream on Mondays and Thursdays. I'm not streaming on Monday this week because it's a public holiday. It was a public holiday in Ireland yesterday, so I was spending time with my kids. And I'm not streaming on Thursday this week because it's Halloween and I'm going to be bringing my kids trick-or-treating. So what I'm going to do is this week I might stream a little bit earlier on Friday. I'm not going to go at like 4 o'clock Irish time on Friday, mainly because Matt Stauffer streams then, and I like to watch his stream. So I might try and stream for a little bit before Matt comes online on Friday, and then next week we'll start getting into the proper routine of doing it every Monday and Thursday at 4 p.m. GMT, which is 12 midday Eastern time and 9 a.m. Pacific time, I believe. So anybody who was out there watching today, thanks for watching, and anybody who watches this on the playback video, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully see you guys in the next one. Thanks.